On the evening of the 3rd of March, 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard was kidnapped in South London, England, as she was walking home to the Brixton Hill area from a friend's house near Clapham Common. Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Cousins told Everard that he was arresting her for having breached COVID-19 regulations but drove her to near Dover where he raped and strangled her, before burning her body and disposing of her remains in a nearby pond. On the 9th of March, 2021, Cousins was arrested in Deal, Kent, first on suspicion of effecting Everard's kidnap and later on suspicion of her murder. Everard's remains were discovered in woodland near Ashford, Kent on the 10th of March. Following their identification, Cousins was charged with her kidnapping and murder. Vigils were held for Everard on the evening of the 13th of March. The vigil on Clapham Common, near where she had disappeared, led to a controversial police response and 4 arrests for breaches of COVID-19 regulations. The murder gave rise to widespread debate about the role of police in British society and women's safety in the UK. On the 8th of June, 2021, Cousins pleaded guilty to Everard's kidnapping and admitted responsibility for her death, and on the 9th of July he pleaded guilty to her murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order on the 30th of September, 2021. Sarah Everard was born in Surrey in June, 1987. She grew up in York, where she attended Fulford School. She studied human geography at St Cuthbert's Society, Durham University, from 2005 to 2008. At the time of her death, Everard lived in the Brixton Hill area and worked as a marketing executive for a digital media agency. Wayne Cousins, born 1972 in Dover, Kent, was serving with the Metropolitan Police, Met, as a police constable and firearms officer at the time of Everard's murder. He had joined the Met from the Civil Nuclear Constabulary in September 2018, and in February 2020, was assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Branch, the division responsible for uniformed protection of government and diplomatic premises. Cousins had not undergone enhanced vetting as part of his recruitment, nor had he gone through the mandatory 2-year probation period with the Met before joining the PAD. Cousins's crimes led to a non-statutory inquiry headed by Dame Elish Angelini over how Cousins could work as a police officer for 3 separate forces despite his behavior causing concern. Incident and investigation. On the 28th of February, 2021, Cousins booked a white Vauxhall car from a vehicle hire company in Dover. At 7 o'clock GMT on the 3rd of March, he completed a 12-hour shift at the US Embassy in London, 18 before travelling to Kent to collect the hire car. He then drove back to London where he was recorded as being in Earl's Court and on Battersea Bridge. After arriving in Clapham, he again drove to Earl's Court before returning to Clapham at 21:23. At around 2100 hours, Everard had left a friend's house on Leithwaite Road near Clapham Junction. West of Clapham Common she walked along the A205 South Circular Road across the Common en route to her Brixton Hill home. She spoke to her boyfriend on her phone for about 15 minutes and agreed to meet him the next day at 21:28. She was seen on doorbell camera footage on Pointers Road and 4 minutes later on the dashcam of a passing police car. At 21:34, Cousins, who had parked the Vauxhall on the pavement outside Pointers Court, stopped Everard and showed her his police warrant card before handcuffing her, claiming that he was arresting her for having breached COVID guidelines. Cousins and Everard were twice captured by bus CCTV. The first instance at 21:35 showed them beside the hired Vauxhall and the second, at 21:38, showed the Vauxhall's number plate. Around this time, Cousins and Everard entered the car and Cousins drove to Kent. The route of the car was retrospectively tracked using CCTV and ANPR. By 23:43, Cousins and Everard were in Dover and had transferred to Cousins's personal seat car. Between 23:53 and 0:57 on the 4th of March, Cousins's mobile phone connected to cell sites in the area of Sibbertswold, and it is believed that this is when he raped Everard. At 2:34, Cousins purchased drinks from a Dover petrol station. It is believed that he strangled Everard using his police duty belt at some point before this. Cousins then drove to Hoods Wood near Ashford, where his car was captured on CCTV in the area between 3:22 and 06:32 before driving back to Dover to switch back into his rental car before returning it at 8:26. After Cousins returned the hire car, he drove his personal car to Sandwich, Kent, disposing of Everard's mobile phone in one of the town's watercourses at 9:21. Later that day, Everard's boyfriend contacted the police after Everard did not meet him. In the days after the murder, Cousins told senior colleagues that he was suffering from stress and no longer wanted to carry a gun. On the 5th of March, shortly after 11 o'clock, Cousins bought and filled a petrol container at a service station in Whitfield. He then drove to Hoods Wood, where his car was captured on CCTV at 12:37, and burned Everard's body inside a refrigerator at 13:40. 47. He bought 2 large builder's bags from B&Q before returning to Hodes Wood on the 7th of March, where he used one of the bags to dispose of Everard's remains in a pond. On the 8th of March he reported himself ill from work, handing in his equipment including his police belt and handcuffs. At 16:20 on the 10th of March, police searching Hodes Wood found human remains in a large builder's bag, approximately 100 meters, 110 feet, from a plot of land that Cousins owned. Police in Dover also searched the site of a former body repair garage, previously owned by Cousins's family, at the top of the White Cliffs. On the 12th of March, Everard's body was identified through dental records. 2 days later, police focused a search operation around the road walk in Sandwich, and cordoned off approximately 1 square mile of the town. On the 16th of March, police continued to comb woodland in Kent and police divers in Sandwich searched underwater for Everard's mobile phone. Everard's funeral took place on the 22nd of May at Heslington Church in Heslington, near York. The results of a post-mortem held at William Harvey Hospital in Ashford were released on the 1st of June. The investigation concluded that she had died from compression of the neck. On the 9th of March, Cousins was arrested at his home in Deal on suspicion of kidnapping. Police arrived at his house at 17:45 and entered it at 19:50 to make the arrest. Around 40 minutes before he was arrested, Cousins tried to wipe the data from his mobile phone. When interviewed, he initially claimed not to recognize Everard after being shown a photograph of her. He then claimed to be having financial problems after paying for sex in Folkestone, and that a gang of Eastern Europeans had threatened him and his family, demanding he deliver another girl after underpaying a prostitute a few weeks before. A woman in her 30s was also arrested at the address on suspicion of assisting an offender but subsequently released without charge. On the 10th of March, the day Everard's remains were discovered, Cousins was rearrested on suspicion of murder. On the 11th of March, Cousins was hospitalized following a head injury sustained in custody. He was again briefly hospitalized the following day after a similar injury. After the incident on the 11th of March, police said the injury was sustained while he was alone in his cell. Cousins was charged with Everard's kidnapping and murder on the 12th of March, following authorization from the Crown Prosecution Service. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court on the 13th of March and was remanded in custody before appearing at the Old Bailey via video link from Belmarsh Prison on the 16th of March. On the 8th of June, Cousins pleaded guilty to kidnap and rape, and admitted responsibility for Everard's death. Pending medical reports into his mental health at the time of Everard's death, Cousins did not enter a plea on the charge of murder. At a hearing on the 9th of July, Cousins pleaded guilty to murder. On video link from Belmarsh Prison, he kept his head down and was shaking slightly. It was reported that he had hired a car and bought a roll of self-adhesive film, strong enough to hold carpets down, days before the murder. He and the victim were complete strangers and were unknown to each other prior to her abduction. After the plea hearing, it was reported that Kent police had received a report in 2015 of a man in a car in Dover, naked from the waist down. It was believed there may have been enough information recorded in the Kent police system to have identified the man as Cousins, who was a serving police officer at the time. Speaking outside the Old Bailey, Cressida Dick, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, said she felt sickened, angered and devastated by Cousins's crimes, adding, "They are dreadful and everyone in policing feels betrayed. Sarah was a fantastic, talented young woman with her whole life ahead of her and that has been snatched away." The sentencing hearing before Lord Justice Fulford began at the Old Bailey on the 29th of September following medical and psychiatric reports. Cousins's barrister, Jim Sturman QC, asked Fulford to consider imposing a life sentence with a determinate tariff which would allow Cousins to become eligible for release on license in his 80s. On the 30th of September, Cousins was sentenced to life imprisonment with a tariff of a whole life order, with Fulford justifying the severity of the punishment by saying that Cousins's use of his position as a police officer to detain Everard was the vital factor which in my view makes the seriousness of this case exceptionally high. In October 2021, it was reported that Cousins was applying for leave to appeal against his sentence. In July 2022, his appeal against his whole life sentence was rejected by the Court of Appeal. As of December 2021, Cousins was imprisoned at HM Prison Frankland in County Durham. In March 2022, Cousins was further charged with 4 counts of indecent exposure related to alleged incidents in January and February 2021. On the 24th of May 2022, he pleaded not guilty via video link from Frankland Prison.